Thank you, Manjula. Once again, a great summary video of our Venus session with Dr. Jim Garvin that we held 2 weeks ago. Got another great session today, and it's timely. And so I'm just really pleased that all of you are here. When we started Book a Scientist, I had this idea last year that we would methodically go through all of the planets. And we started with Dr. Sean Solomon to do Mercury, and then we had Jim Garvin scheduled, but he got kind of displaced because of the government shutdown, and so we went on ahead with Steve Voles, who did Earth, and now we backed up. Last time we backed up to Venus with Jim, but it was recommended to us by Sean Solomon that we start with an overview of why we study planets at all. And we invited Dr. Barbara Cohen to give that presentation all those months ago. And she just did a fabulous job. Well, in that process, I learned that she is the mission scientist, I think I got that right, for the Artemis II and maybe even for the Artemis III mission. And so she can tell us a little bit about what that means. But it is really a privilege to have somebody in charge of the science that's going to be done on the next initiative to return to the moon. And so this is more, Artemis II is more than just an engineering feat. We are sending people further out in space than we ever have before. They're not going to land. There are 4 brave people that are testing out the system, but there's science along the way. And so we want to understand what that's going to be and what the potential of all of that can be. And so with that, Barbara, I'll let you go over your, background if you want to, but you're no stranger to Book of Scientists, so welcome back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation and the chance to talk to you all about Artemis. Can you see that slide up there?
We can.
Great. Okay. So, yeah, thanks for having me back to talk about the moon and our initiative to go to the moon called Artemis. As Jim said, this is NASA's big initiative in human spaceflight. So a lot of the things that you hear about for planetary science, things that Dr. Garvin talked about and Dr. Solomon talked about, those are robotic missions that we do that are science-led or science-driven. We have the science question that we want to answer. We build a spacecraft that's going to go answer that question for us. Always brings up more questions than it answers. That's how we do science. But Artemis is a little bit different. Artemis is our human spaceflight initiative. So when we think about things like people going to the International Space Station or during Apollo when people went to the moon, we want to send people into space. That is a program that we have at NASA and many international partners helping us along the way. That's a program that we have to send humans beyond low Earth orbit. It pays us dividends on the Earth. So, not only in science, we'll talk about the science, but also in terms of pushing technologies. Can we learn to live and work outside of the protective sphere of the Earth? It also pays us dividends in economic gains as we make those technology leaps, and not just for the US, for all of our partners as well. We spin off those technologies, and those technologies find their way into other parts of society. So when we think about things like life support systems, how can we recycle our water and make cleaner water? That's going to be really important as our sources of fresh water are diminishing. How can we do good climate control? Climate controlled spaces are going to be really important to us as our climate changes. So there's a lot of reasons that we do human spaceflight. Science is just one of them. I'm a scientist. I am the Artemis 4 project scientist. I'm also on the science teams for Artemis 2 and 3. And I mostly worry about the samples that we're going to bring back in Artemis 3 and 4. But I'm on the team for Artemis 2, and I'm really excited to share with you today what's coming up just around the corner, Artemis 2. We'll talk a little bit about Artemis 3 and 4 at the very end, and then what we really want to do is go on to Mars. How can we use these missions to help us understand how to send people to Mars and how to expand our sphere all the way out to Mars? So I can't really see you on the screen to ask questions. So I would ask, let's have questions at the end. So if you've got a question, like scribble it down and then ask me at the end, okay?
That's right. Just like last time, Barbara, and I'll help moderate the questions.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. If there's something that someone doesn't understand, feel free to jump in.
Actually, they can place comments in the chat, and that is really helpful.
Okay, super. Okay, so like I said, Artemis is our program, NASA's program, along with our international partners, and we have over 60 signees, nations signed on to the Artemis Accords, which helps us all go together. Artemis is this initiative that we're going to go back to the moon and we're going to be in a sustainable presence there. Sustainable has many words, many meanings to many people, but what we really mean is building a lunar base there and being able to use that base to live and work on another planet. So uh, we want to be able to go somewhere where we can use resources of the moon so we don't have to continually bring everything with us. So we've chosen the lunar South Pole. The South Pole is good because it has abundant sunlight if you want to run solar panels, and it has deep, dark craters that may have ice, water ice, and some other kinds of volatiles in there that we may be able to mine. Of course, the moon is full of normal silicate materials, things that have all sorts of cations, iron, titanium, magnesium, calcium, and abundant oxygen locked up in those rocks. So there's other things that you could do to mine the rocks as well. So the south pole of the moon is where we are going, and we're going to do this in a stepwise fashion. So Artemis 1, Artemis 2, Artemis 3, Artemis 4, Artemis 17, Artemis 127. We're going to have a lot of missions going to the moon. So I'm just going to tell you about the first several of them. Again, why do we go? Science is one of the pillars of why we go, and that is my job as the project scientist. It is my job to put as much science into this opportunity as we can. So, unlike Da Vinci or Messenger or any of these other great missions that you're going to hear about, we don't get to start with science. We don't get to say, well, here are the things that I want to do as a scientist. Now, make the mission work for me. Human exploration is much bigger than that. There's a lot of things that we want to do with humans exploring. Again, economic benefits, inspirations to generations, things that power our human spaceflight program. So it's my job to stuff as much science into those missions as we can, given the fact that we're going anyway. We're already going, so why not get the most science out of it that we can? Artemis 1 flew in 2022. It was a very successful flight. I'll show you a video in the next slide of what that looked like. Maybe you watched it. I certainly did. I was there at the Cape. I got to see it. That was just a life-changing event. It's a huge rocket. It was the first time we tested the Space Launch System, which is the rocket. We'll talk about that, along with the Orion capsule on top of it. It's as big or bigger than, just about as big as the Saturn V rockets that took people to the moon in the 1960s. Artemis 2 this year, maybe next week or 2 weeks from now, Artemis 2, the first crew. And as Jim said, these are people who are going farther than any humans have ever gone before. They're going actually farther than the Apollo astronauts went. And you can see the crew there. We'll talk about the crew too, but the crew is has the first woman, the first person of color, and the first non-American to go beyond low Earth orbit. And they're going to go further than any astronaut has ever been before. Artemis 3 will be our first landing. Artemis 2 doesn't land on the moon. Artemis 2 tests out our rocket and our capsule and our life support, tests with crew. Artemis 3, the mission after that, will be the one that lands on the surface. So it will land on the surface. We have 2 crew come out and walk around on the surface. There's tons of things we can do. We'll talk about that at the very end. Artemis 4, the mission I'm the project scientist for, has Gateway. Gateway is a mini space station that will go into orbit around the moon, and that'll be a waypoint for crew. That'll be something that we can put instruments on. We can test out microgravity. We have living quarters there. That's a place where crew can go and spend some time between the trips to the lunar surface. And then beyond that, tons of things. We need a habitat on the moon. We need power systems on the moon. We need vehicles on the moon to take crew to different places around the surface. Tons of things are coming up. Those are all in the works. Again, with our international partners contributing to them, Italy is helping contribute the habitat. JAXA is contributing a pressurized rover. These are great, great opportunities for us to share this exciting venture with the whole world. Okay, so here's the Artemis 1 mission.
Will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and
The spacewalk system is now counting down to liftoff of Orion, its maiden voyage to the moon. And here we go. Hydrogen burn off the values initiate. 7, 6, 5, 4 stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters indicated. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis.
We'll talk about all these stages as we go. All of the bits of rockets that you see. Here's the solar panels in Orion, the different stages that happen.
From a human-rated spacecraft not seen since 1972 during the final Apollo missions.
No crew. Those are dummies inside.
Distant retrograde orbit, we're gonna be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface.
That's the far side of the moon,
Anywhere
seen from Orion.
Apollo. The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit.
Crew capsule comes down on parachutes, splashes into the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so that was Artemis 1, again, 2022, very successful test flight, the very first flight of the rocket and the capsule. So now let's talk about Artemis 2 and what we're doing in addition to what we did in Artemis 1. So Artemis 1 had this great rocket and this capsule. Artemis 2 is taking things a step further. It's the same rocket, it's the same capsule. So now we have the experience with the rocket and the capsule. We have life support in that capsule now. And the life support is there to support the 4 crew who are going to be in the capsule. So that's a big first for NASA. We have not sent people beyond the space station in 50 years, more than 50 years. So we'll have those life support systems. We have a demonstration of how to pilot the Orion spacecraft. So in the Orion spacecraft, that has to dock, right? We talked about the gateway, we talked about the human lander, we're going to talk about those things. The Orion has to dock with those elements. So someone has to be inside the Orion, piloting the Orion to make those dockings. So this is practice for the crew to figure out how Orion really works. They've done a lot of simulations on the ground, but there's nothing like doing it in real life. So they will practice docking. They're called proximity operations. So things that you do inside one capsule in proximity to another piece of hardware. So they're not going to do an actual docking, but they're going to do maneuvering, feel how it responds, feel how they can go backwards and forwards, all those good things. And then there's going to be some science that we get to do that we didn't get to do on Artemis 1. So Artemis 1 had a lot of internal instruments. They had those dummies. They had a lot of instruments inside the capsule. This is the first time where we'll get to use the humans as our eyes and ears and really understand how humans work in space. And so that'll be important to us when we talk about lunar observations as well. That bottom line there is really important. Ensuring crew safety is our top priority. So things about Artemis 1, when it's just a rocket and an empty capsule, we can do things where we're like, we're pretty sure this is safe. We're pretty sure we're going to get our hardware back. You can't be pretty sure when there's crew on board. So I would ask you to just be patient. Artemis 1 had its wet dress rehearsal in March of 2022, and it ended up flying in November of 2022. So it took that long to make sure that the rocket and the capsule were safe and were good to fly. We're trying that now. We've just started the process, wet dress rehearsal, trying to test the Artemis II stack, but it's even more important that it be safe because we have crew on top of it this time. We want our friends to fly, but we want our friends to come home. And so just be patient with us as NASA works through the process of making sure that this mission is safe to fly. Here is the crew. Here are our friends. Our crew is part of our science team. They are our eyes and ears. The human brain and the human eyes are the most sophisticated scientific instrument that we have. You are geologists, all of you. You don't realize it. Maybe you don't call yourself a geologist. But I promise you, every time you go out in your backyard or you're walking down the street, if you pick up a rock, any rock, it really doesn't matter what kind of rock. Doesn't matter how big, how small, what it is. All you have to do is pick up a rock, hold it in your hand, and turn it in your wrist in the sunlight. What you've done there is you've figured out how heavy it is compared to all the other objects that you've ever picked up in your life. You know how big it is. That means you know its density, right? Its mass per volume. So you know how dense it is compared to other things in your life. You have that database in your brain. You didn't even know you had it. Doesn't take any special measurements, doesn't take any special science instruments. It's your brain and your eyes that did that. When you held it in your fingers, you figured out how hard it was to crush. That is called friability. That's a really important parameter in geology and something that you don't need anything special to measure because you just did it with your fingers and you have a whole database in your brain of other things that are like that. How squishy is it? How easy is it to break? When you hold it in the sunlight and you look at the facets on the rock, or you look at what color it is, or what the grains are made out of, now you're doing what's called petrology. You're figuring out what the components are that make up that rock. And you're comparing it to all the thousands and millions and billions of other things that you've seen. And so you can give it a description. Those are things that geologists do. Those are fundamental science measurements. And to program that kind of robot is more than we can do right now. All of the robots that are trundling around on Mars, they've never picked up a rock and held it and figured out its density. That's not something that we do with robots. It is something that we do with humans. We are learning how to have humans be the most sophisticated instruments when we send them to the moon and to Mars. So this is our crew. They're also doing a lot of other things. They're doing a lot of things for human spaceflight, but this is how I see them. They are our eyes and ears and brains to do our science for us. Here's a video of the crew.
I'm Christina Cook. I'm a mission specialist.
I'm Jeremy Hansen. I'm a mission specialist. I'm Victor Glow. I'm the pilot. I'm Reed Wiseman. I'm the commander of the Artemis II mission to the moon.
To the moon.
To the moon. To the moon.
When I was young, I had a poster of the Earthrise picture, the famous picture that was taken on Apollo 8. And the fact that it was a human behind the lens that made that picture so profound and changed how we all thought of our own home was so amazing to me. The moon is not just a symbol of thinking about our place in the universe. It's not just a symbol of exploration. It's actually a beacon for science. It's a beacon for understanding where we came from.
You know, pushing ourselves to explore is just core to who we are. It's a part of being a human. That's our nature. We go out there and we explore to learn about where we are, why we are, understanding the big questions about our place in the universe. The exploration we're doing is the first few steps on the path of getting humans to Mars.
The Artemis campaign and missions have set such an ambitious goal for humanity that it's inspiring contributions from around the globe. Not just one nation is inspired and moved by this, but nations from around the globe are coming together. When I look at the Artemis II crew with Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, they want to go do this mission. They are keenly driven. They are humble to a fault. It is so cool to be around them. Artemis II is a huge mission, but I hope we will look back and realize that this was one tiny step in humans on Mars and a sustained presence on our moon.
Artemis II will be NASA's first crewed flight test of the Space Launch System rocket
and Orion spacecraft around the moon,
to verify today's capabilities for humans to explore deep space.
and pave the way for NASA's long-term human and scientific presence on the lunar surface.
We are ready.
We are going
to the moon.
for all humanity. We are Artemis.
It's just so cool. It's just hard for me to imagine being one of those people. They're super great people. They're super on board with all the lunar science that we're asking them to do, all the other things that they're being asked to do. It's really quite amazing. Let's go. Advance my slide. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through the hardware really quick. This is not my area of expertise, but you might have questions about it. So I'm going to walk you through these diagrams. The Space Launch System is the rocket. So that's what you're hearing about in the news now. What the wet dress rehearsal is trying to fuel this rocket so that it can get the crew off the Earth and into orbit. Sorry, they don't go into orbit around the moon. They go past the moon and come back. So this is what the rocket looks like. Here's the core stage. Sometimes you'll hear about core stage fueling. That's what this is. It's the big liquid engine in the middle. There's solid rocket boosters. Whoops, you saw those fall away in the video. You'll see those fall away. So they get spent, they fall away. So all of that is needed to just get out of Earth orbit, put this into a high Earth orbit. And then what they're carrying is everything up here. So they're carrying a second stage, which is the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS. That is going to be what pushes Orion into translunar injection. And then all the way up here is the Orion capsule itself. So this is where the crew are. 4 crew. It's about the interior size of about 2 minivans. They're only going to be up there for 10 days. You could live in a minivan for 10 days if you had to, especially if you're going to have the moon out your window. Here's the Orion itself. Like I said, here's the capsule itself. This is the service module. This includes a contribution by the European Space Agency that is providing the services, so water and air and things like that attached to the crew capsule. And then up here is the launch abort system. This is something that NASA always has now for crew, right? Because we want to make sure that if anything goes wrong in that rocket stack, those solid rockets and that big liquid booster, if anything goes wrong down there, we can pluck the crew off and bring them safely to Earth. So that's what the launch abort system is for. Okay, here's a video of how we stack those parts together. This is the stack. This is the actual hardware for Artemis II. This does not have sound. So there's all the core stage. There's the upper stage, right, with the Orion. Here's that core stage. That orange is insulation. It's similar to what the space shuttle used. There's those 2 boosters on the sides. Mating them all together. This is in the vehicle assembly building down at Cape Canaveral. So it's all put together inside, and then it all gets put onto what we call the mobile launcher, and that's what crawls out to the pad with the whole rocket. Okay, so going to launch, going to go into what we call a free return trajectory. So it's not going to go into orbit around the moon. It's going to swing by the moon and come right back. While it's swinging around the moon, they're going to have views of the far side. They're going to have views that no one's ever seen before, actually. So I'm going to walk you through the trajectory because sometimes it's a little hard to understand. So let's watch this video here. This goes through each part of the mission. So this is an animation. This isn't the real thing. There it is on the pad for launch.
I'm Christina Cook. I'm a mission specialist.
Gosh, I don't know why the audio is doing this. I'm gonna shut the audio off. Right, okay, so it is flying up there. It goes into orbit around the Earth first. So why we're doing that is because now the astronauts have a safe abort option. So the first thing they do is just go around the Earth. And while they're doing that, there's Orion separating and opening up. If there's any problems on Orion, if there's any problems with the life support system, anything, they can come right back to Earth in 24 hours with no problems. If everything is good, they're going to do this burn, right? And so they're going to do this proximity operations. They're going to burn that second stage. It's going to get them out of Earth orbit. Now they're going to turn around, do this practice with that upper stage, come in and out. They go into this high Earth orbit, and then they've got one more burn to do. If everything is good here, as they're going around in high Earth orbit, they're going to burn one more time and push them away from the Earth into what we call translunar injection. So translunar is what swings them out to the moon. Now, when you're going in this path, if you wanted to get into orbit around the moon, you've got to burn again. You've got to slow down and let yourself get captured by the moon. Well, we're not going to slow down. We're not going to let ourselves get captured by the moon. And so what we're going to do is just use that little gravity well to swing around. And they're going to get these amazing views of the moon right here as they go around the far side of the moon. And then they're just going to fall right back to the Earth. So the gravity of the Earth recaptures them. They're going to fall right back to the Earth. And then they're going to go through the Earth's atmosphere to slow down and then come in on parachutes, same as what you saw in Artemis I. So now they're leaving the moon behind. The Earth's getting bigger and bigger in their views. And then we're going to use the Earth's atmosphere to slow down. So we have a heat shield on the Orion capsule. Here's Orion separating from its service module and turning. So now that heat shield is face down, right? So the heat shield is taking all the heat of re-entry, coming in like a little meteor. That takes away a lot of the speed. And then you're going to see a series of parachutes deploy. So there's multiple parachutes. There's a high parachute. It'll drop those. It'll take another set of parachutes. It's going to drop those and then get its final set of parachutes. So it's going to be losing speed this whole time. There we go. There's the final set of chutes. They're colored like this because we'll be able to see them in the atmosphere and we'll be able to see how they turn. Oops, go, stop that. So we'll be able to see how they go and then be able to pick them up. So there's an aircraft carrier on the Pacific Ocean that's going to pick them up and then pick up the capsule and bring everyone safely home. Okay, so on their voyage, what are they going to be doing? Like I said, our job is to be able to cram as much science as we can into this kind of mission. Now, when we send humans, there is a whole group at NASA and a whole international group that really is focused on human health and biology. So there's keeping the crew safe. We're always going to keep the crew safe. That's not an experiment. That's not something that we don't know. We know how to do that, and we will keep the crew safe. But then there's other things that we want to do, like monitor how they respond to the safety measures that we're putting in, how they respond to radiation, how they respond to microgravity, how they respond to breathing the different air. So all of those things are being monitored. And then there's work on the ground that biologists do after the mission. So one of the things that they're doing is sending up tissue, blood cells that they've already collected from the crew. They're the crew's own blood cells, and they've prepared them in a number of different ways, and they're going to expose them to different kinds of environments. So then they can compare them to the crew when they come down. The two things that I'm involved in personally are preparing for surface science operations and doing these lunar observations. So the main point that we're trying to accomplish is doing this surface science. When we land with Artemis III and Artemis IV and Artemis V and beyond, we have amazing things that we want our crew to be able to do on the lunar surface. So we want them to be able to be ready to go. The crew is ready to go. The crew are raring to go, but we've got to train them. So we've got to learn how to train crew. It sounds a little weird saying it that way, but they're not geologists. We want them to act like geologists. We've got to get them trained up. How do they respond to that? How do they learn? We've got to get them in the suits ready for the microgravity environment of the moon, or not the microgravity, the 1/6 gravity environment of the moon. It's different from microgravity. Our generation doesn't have experience with that. No crew has experience with that. We've got to get them ready for that. When we look at the International Space Station and the way we run the space station, how we do science on the space station is a very different model from what we want to do on the moon. They're not just working outside the space station in an environment that they understand. They've got a lot of things that are unknown. We call it discovery-driven science. That means we don't know everything. We've got hypotheses that we want to test. But again, we want to use the crew's eyes and brains to be able to test them. And that's not just the scientists talking. That means everyone up and down in mission control, in human health and safety, the people who make the spacesuits, the people who make the tools. Everyone has to be pulling in the same direction to enable that to happen. And Artemis II is the way that we're trying to start that process, getting everyone on the same page. We'll be making these lunar observations, I'll tell you more about them, as they go around the moon. These aren't going to be as good observations from a photographic point of view as our robotic missions. We have lots of robotic missions. We have Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, we have Chandrayaan, we have Chang'e, lots of different kinds of robotic missions that are taking amazing pictures of the moon, including the far side, including the poles. That's not what this is about. What it's about is using the humans to be able to describe what they're seeing and to be able to point to things that they are interested in. What interests them? How are they describing them? There are 4 CubeSats that are flying on board. So after Orion separates from the SLS, that ring that connects them together is going to eject CubeSats from our international partners. So that's going to be exciting for them. That's not my area of expertise, but we're really excited for our international partners to collect amazing science from these CubeSats when they get deployed. So again, human health and biology, this isn't about keeping the crew safe. We're always going to keep the crew safe. That's our #1 priority. After that, we want to see how they respond and how we can improve their experience. So we don't want the astronauts to just live. We want them to thrive. We want them to know how to live and work in space. So these are experiments that we're doing that are separate from keeping crew safe, that are going to help us keep crew thriving, that are going to help us go farther and do more. And then this preparing for surface science, like I said, is really important for us. So we have someone in mission control. There's a science officer in mission control. Here's crew on the bottom left. That's crew taking these lunar observations, practicing them in Orion. You can see it's a little cramped in there, but this is what they're actually going to be doing. They've got a little iPad there that's telling them where to look. You can see Christina there trying to look out the window and talk about what she's seeing. And the bottom right there, that's our science back room. So that's where I'll be. That's mission control. That's the scientists trying to talk about what we want the crew to do. And then when we hear what they're doing, what they did and how well it met our needs. So yeah, there's me in mission control on the left there. So that's where I'll be 2 weeks from today. This is what the crew is going to see. It's a simulation using Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter data. Oh man, I don't know why this is messed up. Okay, well, you're not going to see that. It's gonna look about the size of a basketball or a soccer ball or a football if you hold it at arm's length. So if you've got a sports ball and you're holding it out at arm's length, that's about the size that they're going to see on the moon. So that's not that much from your eye, from your point of view of your eye, but we're going to give them cameras with zoom lenses, really big zoom lenses. And so that's going to be like their binoculars. So they're going to zoom in on those features. They're going to describe what they're seeing. If there's color, if there's shadow, if there's peaks and mountains and valleys, if there's differences.
Can I come in?
Sure, but I'm talking. Sorry, give me just a sec. Yeah,
Oh,
it's okay.
I'm just bringing these.
Okay, no worries. So that's what they'll be able to see as they're going around. Gosh, why is this not working? Okay, living in Orion, like I said, it's about the size of 2 minivans. So they'll be able to move around a little bit. You can see their crew hammocks there that they're going to set up. That's for sleeping. So they'll have 10 days in this little space. They've practiced this a lot, but they haven't actually lived for 10 days in Orion. So this will be new to them too. They do have a little toilet, but they don't have a shower. So they'll be doing sponge baths like you would on a camping trip. They have tons of food, tons of water. They have entertainment that they're bringing up, so they can be watching videos in their off time. So they've got sleeping time, they've got off time, they've got meal time, right? So 10 days, we're going to keep them healthy and happy. And this is what it looks like right now. So everything is stacked on the pad in Florida. There's a live video feed that you can watch of everything that's happening in Florida right now. It's ready to go. We're just trying to tweak it to make it as safe as we can. before we put our crew on it and launch it. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes here on what's coming up. What's coming up next? Artemis 3. Artemis 3 is going to have all the things that you saw in Artemis 1, all the things you saw in Artemis 2, and it's going to have a lander. So when the crew gets to the moon next time on Orion, they are going to burn and go into orbit. When they're in orbit, there's going to be this landing system there waiting for them. This is the SpaceX Starship lander. That's going to have already launched. It's going to be waiting for them in lunar orbits. Their ride is waiting. They will dock with the spaceship, with the Starship. 2 people will get into the Starship, and then they'll undock and go down to the surface of the moon. When they're there at the South Pole of the moon, it'll be the first time that humans have set full foot at the South Polar region of the moon. There's a lot to learn there from a geology point of view, from a solar history point of view, from a human health and safety point of view. We're going to test these suits. They're going to pick up rocks. They're going to interact with the environment. We're going to see if there's water in places that we don't know there's water now. We're going to really explore this kind of discovery-driven science mode. And then Artemis 4, the project scientists for Artemis 4, all the things you saw in Artemis 1, all the things you saw in Artemis 2, all the things you saw in Artemis 3, and now we're going to have this gateway, this little this little space station around the moon. So instead of the Orion docking directly to the lander, we're all going to dock at Gateway. We're all going to figure out how to use Gateway to live and work around the moon itself. And then all the things that are going to come after, Artemis 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, habitats, mobile vehicles, little rovers, pressurized rovers. We can put down instruments. We can be living and working and thriving off our planet. What we want to do eventually, like I said in the beginning, go to the Mars, right? Mars is our horizon goal. We want to expand our sphere of influence beyond just the Earth-Moon system, all the way out to Mars. All the great reasons why we have crew go to the moon, our eyes and ears and brains, their dexterity, their mobility, all those things, bringing those to Mars would be amazing. I told you earlier that even this simple experiment that you can do with your hand and a rock, we haven't been able to do with rovers. But when we have humans there, they are going to do all those things. It's going to be an amazing time when we're able to explore Mars with humans. So let's go. Let's go. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be going. 4 Artemis II astronauts. There's their names. They're amazing people. They're our friends and our scientists, and we're really excited to have them go see this view of the moon that no one's ever seen. The SLS rocket, an amazing accomplishment. If you like rockets, we can talk more about the SLS rocket. It's a really amazing machine. It's as tall as a 32-story building. It's pretty big. The Artemis II mission is going to be 10 days long. It's going to go to the moon and back. And the astronauts will see parts of the moon that no human has ever seen with their own eyes. So that's really exciting for us, and we're really excited to see what they're going to see. And I'll end there. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. One of the things I just want to say about the SLS, and I know you've experienced this, but it's very similar in terms of the rocket engines to the space shuttle.
Yes.
And so like it uses space shuttle liquid engines in the core stage, and there's the solid rocket boosters that are very similar, just a little bigger than the ones on the space shuttle. And so when you stand 5 miles away, which is as close as you can get as an observer, to watch these things take off, it's amazing to watch them jump off the pad and get, like this far up in the sky before you hear anything, right? Because it moves so fast due to the solid rocket motors. And then the sound starts.
And then the sound starts, and the sound, you can feel it, right? You can feel that pressure wave come, and
it gets louder and louder, and you hear the spark and the crackle of the solid rocket motors, and you begin to realize that this is probably one of the most powerful things humanity has ever invented. And then just when you think it can't get any louder, it gets louder still. It's just an absolutely, like you said, life-changing experience. Um, it is. So if any of our viewers ever get the opportunity to see a rocket launch, they should do that because it's an amazing, amazing experience. Yeah, well, thank you for the great overview on Artemis and the Artemis science that's going to go along on Artemis 2. Now we'll do some questions, and they've been stacking up here in the chat. So
Sure.
I'll just scroll up to the top here, and um, we'll start. I'll pick and choose so the grown-ups don't get too upset if I pick kids over top of you. Um, but I don't know if this is a grown-up or a kid. But Leanne asks, "Will the capsule be the same one that is used and returned to Earth for Artemis 1?" So in other
Oh,
words, are they reusing the same Orion vehicle?
that's a really good question. The answer is no for between Artemis 1 and 2. I'm actually not 100% sure about Artemis 3. They're intended to be reusable, but there is more than one. So they are reusable. When they come back to Earth, they will be refurbished and used again. But I don't know. I know there is more than one, and I don't know which one gets used on which mission. But they are intended to be reusable and used again.
Yeah. So, and then Elizabeth asked kind of a similar sort of question, which need to be maintained and repaired so
Yes,
they can be reused again. But
that's right.
the follow on to that is, if you missed the window in March,
Yep.
when is the next opportunity?
So moon opportunities go with the lunar month. And you probably know that the lunar month is 28 days long, and the lunar day is 28 days long, 28 terrestrial days long. So every 28 days, there's another moon launch opportunity. So we have opportunities through the rest of 2026. They're 28 days apart.
So you can figure it out yourself, right? So early
So I'll
March.
give you the link too. There's
Yeah.
a link of opportunities coming up, but yeah.
Okay, and we can post that in the WhatsApp group
Yep.
or in the chat if you have time. So let's see. Laluani, one of my favorites at Book of Scientists, wants to know how NASA plans to handle the physiological stress on the astronauts.
That's a really, really great question. It's well outside of my wheelhouse, but I can tell you the things I do know. There's a little resistance flywheel that's in the Orion near the opening hatch, actually. So all of the astronauts have to do, I think it's 30 minutes of exercise on the flywheel every day that they're in Orion. I think, on the space station, they have a whole gym where they work out because they are up there for longer times, and so they have a more intense workout regimen. So they do exercise, resistance exercise to help maintain their muscles and their bones when they're in that microgravity environment. They have a totally nutritionally balanced set of meals. NASA has been at this for a long time. We have 25 years of continuous human presence in the space station. So our nutritional profiles are very good by now. Each crew got to pick their meals, but from the set of nutritionally complete items. They have medical kits. They all have some emergency medical training. Some people have even more than just emergency medical training. So they're all set for the most imaginable medical emergencies, and you know that they are all well vetted before they go up medically. So they're going to be in good shape. Like I said, that is something that is the most important to NASA is we are not just sending them out as experiments. We're making sure that our friends come back safely.
And we learned a lot from the mannequins that flew
Yeah,
on Artemis 1.
a good point.
We understand the launch and the landing environment and what it feels like, at least to the sensors that we put on board on the mannequins.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The launch and landing environments are pretty intense, right? There a lot of vibration, a lot of acceleration or deceleration. They're restrained in seats, but they're going to be, pushing against the seats or pushing against the harness. But yeah, Jim, that's a great point. We have that data from the mannequins that went up on Artemis 1.
Yeah. Let's see. Julius asks a question about at what point will TLI occur, and he wants to. I don't, you may or may not be versed in this, Barbara. He wants to know if that's apogee or perigee.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, I do know that because
okay.
the TLI sets us up for our lunar observations.
Ah,
So we have, all right, as I said, they go into this Earth orbit where they check out the Orion life support systems. So they have to raise their orbit to not come back and hit the Earth immediately to get into that orbit. So they do a burn to just circularize their orbit, and it's not low Earth orbit, but it's not high Earth orbit either. It's an intermediate kind of looping orbit. And then once they're satisfied with all their systems is when they're going to do that translunar injection. And they have a point in their orbit every 24 hours where that can happen, where the windows line up such that they can escape to get to the moon and then come back in this free return orbit. It's very close to the one that's close. Now I can't remember how long.
perigee. Yeah.
Perigee. It's very close to the closest point, right? Because that's where you're doing your burns to raise your orbit anyway, right? So you come back to that point, and the more burns you do there, the more thrust you get out.
Yeah, so for those on Book of Scientists, and Barbara, you can confirm this, but just about everything that happens in terms of trajectories and orbits, they happen on elliptical paths. So an ellipse is like a squashed circle, and at one end of that often is called the focus. There's also another one, but the focus, and that is where the mass that you're orbiting is concentrated, in this case, the Earth. So the Earth is at the focus of this ellipse. And so it has a long distance to the apogee from the Earth, and it has a shorter distance to the perigee from the Earth. Right? And so depending upon what you're trying to accomplish with your trajectory, you might do a burn at perigee or apogee in order to either raise one or lower the other. So the orbit dynamicists understand this really well. And but all you really need to know is perigee is the low one and apogee is the high one. And the way I remember it is apogee starts with A, which means altitude, which is higher than perigee. So, but and maybe that should be on the quiz later. We'll have to see. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Elizabeth asks, what other nations are participating in the Artemis II mission? I know we have the Artemis Accords, and there are, I don't know, what is it, 40 or 50 nations that have
60
signed
now.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
60, yeah. But in terms of the actual hardware on board,
Sure.
you mentioned ESA, and there were logos for the Saudi Space Agency and
Yep.
for DLR, which is Germany.
Yep.
You got any?
Sure. So
Yeah.
we have a Canadian crew member, so Canada, big contribution. ESA is doing the support system, the support service module for Orion. That's their contribution to the hardware. So that's an ongoing contribution. They'll be doing that for every launch. The 4 CubeSats, one is from South Korea, one is from DLR in Germany, one is from the Saudis, and one I think is from Japan. So they're contributing hardware. That's no exchange of funds. They're just contributing their own hardware to that. I know that DLR has a radiation monitor inside of Orion, and I think there are other ones inside of Orion, and I can't remember exactly, but there's one that DLR has been contributing. They contributed it to Artemis I and to the space station, and so I know that's flying inside of Orion on this mission as well.
Awesome. So Lalawani asks, does artificial intelligence play a role in this mission at all, or is it all scripted and figured out?
So artificial intelligence, I think what you're asking is kind of advanced algorithms that make decisions on their own using a training set of models. That's something that I don't think in the way that you're thinking about it. I don't think there's autonomous decision making being made at any point in this mission based on those training models. However, if you think of AI instead of like large language models or things that are making autonomous decisions, if you think of it as an advanced set of algorithms, then yes, of course. We use the most advanced algorithms that we can in lots of things, including like the plumbing systems, valves opening and closing in response to sensors. Those are algorithms that get better and better over time. So I would make like a little distinction there between AI as making autonomous decisions so that humans don't have to make them, and advanced algorithms, which we do. We advance our algorithms all the time.
Right. Yeah. And at some point you rely on those as if you would an AI
That's
because
right. That's right.
they're
I think the
operating in
difference,
the background for you. Yeah.
correct. I think the difference I would draw here is that I'm not an AI scientist, so don't quote me on this, but the way I think of it is AIs are trained on big data sets that aren't necessarily under your full control, right? They're going out into the world and trying to find things to train themselves on. I think the things that NASA is using are things that we train on our own data so that we understand what goes into it, we understand how it's worked, and we understand we've compared those against our outputs so that we're confident that they're giving us the right answers.
Okay. I'm not an AI expert either, but I try and pretend like I am. Anyway, Sophia asks, once the Orion spacecraft gets into orbit around the Earth, how long does it take to get to the moon?
So it takes about 3 days, terrestrial days.
Hmm.
It's about 3 days there and 3 days back. So the whole mission's about 10 days. We've got the first day just around the moon, and then we'll get out into that high Earth orbit that takes about another day. It's about 3 days out. It's about 3 days back, something like that, a little more than 3 days.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and then Elizabeth asks about a question about this is actually more for Artemis 3 and 4. Can you comment a little bit about how you protect astronauts from regolith? The sharp texture of regolith, which is mostly crushed rock,
Mhm.
and whether or not they are allergic to it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the crushed rock that is the regolith gets crushed up into finer and finer sizes. It actually bottoms out at a really fine size because the impacts that are crushing it will also serve to melt it a little bit and then fuse those particles back together. So you can't get infinitely small. You get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you start fusing those particles back together. So it actually does, the size frequency does bottom out. But they are really small. They're so small that you can inhale them. And I think that's what you mean by allergic, right? You can inhale them or you can get them on your skin and they're abrasive. We did see that with the Apollo astronauts. We are expecting to see that with the Artemis astronauts. So there's been a lot of study in the last 50 years about how to deal with this. But honestly, it's a combination of preventing it and just dealing with it. So part of it is preventing the regolith from coming into the capsule as much as possible. That means that you can maybe have a volume outside of your habitable volume where you put your suits on and take them off, leave all that stuff outside your front door, like having a front porch or having a mud room where you leave your stuff in one room and then have a clean area inside. There are research projects going on that use other kinds of things like electrostatic repellents or chemical repellents or treated surfaces that shed those kinds of things. So yes, it's going to be there. We're going to have to learn to deal with it. But there's a lot of research going on into various ways to do that.
And it won't be an issue on this flight, but it is something. So you've got time to continue to investigate
That's right.
um, before we actually get to the surface, right?
Yeah, and then you've got the compounding factor of the geologist wanting to bring that into the capsule. So we actually have, a lot of safety reviews and process and containerization that we have to do, and we're working through that so that we can bring those samples in and take them home.
I know when I go to the beach, I get sand everywhere.
It's harder than sand. It's like Barrel of Monkeys, if you know Barrel of Monkeys, that old
Mhm.
game, right? Where there's particles that stick together like this. So sand is like this, and when you push into it, those particles move away from each other. Lunar regolith is like this, and so when you push down, it doesn't push away from each other. You have to break that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so Julius asks, will the spacecraft be autonomously flown? I mean, there is a pilot on board. So the question is, what benefits do humans aim to achieve by exploring cislunar region, compared to the 60s to the Apollo missions? So kind of two questions. What do we
Yeah.
think we're going to learn beyond what we already learned in Apollo? And two, is there an autopilot for the Orion?
So the autopilot for Orion, I think there is, but I just don't know the details. So I think it's a combination of automatic systems and sensors plus the pilot. So I know the pilot isn't joysticking it 24/7, but I don't know the exact balance. I can try to find a link for you to learn more about how the Orion is piloted. What are we going to learn that we didn't learn during Apollo? So there's two answers to that. One is that we learn how to fly these missions with these hardware and these people and this mission control and this generation of scientists. So it sounds like a terrible answer, but like you can't just ask someone from Apollo how we did it and instantly know what to do. That's not how training works. That's not how learning works. We have to do it over and over again. And so this is a whole new generation, new hardware. We have to learn how it works. We have to learn how our control systems work. We've got 60 years since Apollo of International Space Station, of robotic missions, of science missions behind us. We're going to use all of that in addition to our Apollo experience. What we can learn about cislunar space, though, we have a lot more sophisticated sensors. We have a more sophisticated understanding of how our sun works. So we can be asking different questions about what the sun-Earth environment is like. So there's a little bit there of science, new science that we can learn as we're going into the space. But Artemis II is more truly a test mission of the hardware than it is about learning about the environment itself.
Yeah. Well, since you brought up the whole comparison of the knowledge base, especially the geologists on Apollo versus Artemis, I was going to save this for the last, but Leanne, who's with us, writes that I'll just read it because it's really important. My late husband was a candidate for the Apollo geologist astronaut during the later Apollo missions. He was Buzz Aldrin's geology mentor with Gene Shoemaker and made a map of Apollo 16. Now,
That's
here's
amazing.
a tip for you all. Document your experiences with photos and diaries. My family wishes that we had more photos and impressions. And if you want to reach out to her, she's on Blue Sky as Crater Lady.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm on Blue Sky as Barbalon. So yeah, find me there. You're so right. And we have had several NASA historians interact with us already on our team and on all the other teams, and they have said the exact same thing. So good words of wisdom, document, document, document. But from a personal point of view, I can tell you my role on Artemis 2 in mission control is the science decision documentarian, because that's really, really important to me that we document what we're doing as a team, the decisions we're making, what led to those decisions. That's helpful as a scientist so that when we look back at the data in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, we can say, oh, that's why that picture looks the way it does, or that's why that looks the way it does, right? We had this problem, we made this decision, it turned out this way. But you're so right from a personal point of view, which is a little bit different from what I'm talking about, that we're all keeping journals, we're taking the pictures. We've already started doing that. Make sure that we understand, later how these things happened, the people that did it. Thanks for that
Yeah.
comment.
So we have time for a couple of more questions. I'll just add to that as well. NASA learned its lesson in I would say, the 2000s to 2010 timeframe when we started looking around for the tapes and the films from Apollo, and nobody had saved them. right? And in fact, there was a big, they called it space archaeology effort out at Ames Research Center, where we took what we had, and even the things that we had, we couldn't play because that media didn't. We didn't have machines to play those tapes anymore, so they had to develop new machines and that sort of thing. So, historically speaking, this is going to be something critically important, and especially because we're going to the moon to stay this time. So I think it's a great tip to document everything, whether it's technical, whether it's programmatic, whether it's personal. Everything is important.
You betcha.
Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Jim Green asks, are we ready for the next window in case we miss the March window?
Jim, we are ready when the mission is. You know the answer to that. Science team is ready and waiting. The whole flight team, all of the flight operations, mission managers, everyone, we're ready. We've had flight readiness reviews. We had to have one before we set the first launch window. So we had to certify that we were ready to fly. The crew is ready to fly. Everyone is ready to fly when the mission is. Whenever they're ready, we're ready to do the best mission we can.
Absolutely. Okay, and then coming down the home stretch here, this is a really great question by Julius. How do you mitigate the exposure of the astronauts to the Van Allen belts?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? So this is something that Apollo had to think about. We've thought a lot more about it in the 60 years that we've had since then. So again, we had those Artemis I experiences. We've had, there's spacecraft in orbit around the moon and in orbit in cislunar space that are measuring the actual radiation on tissue equivalent materials. So we're really trying to understand the effect of radiation on the human body and mitigation measures. So I'll point you to a whole site that talks about this. It's not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to be able to go in great detail, but they do have measures inside the Orion to keep the crew safe. And then even if there's like a solar flare, there's emergency measures for transient phenomenon as well. So remind me, Jim, to make that note, and I'll send you to a site that talks about exactly this.
Right, or we could have the next Book of Scientists speaker maybe even mention it. Jim Green is going to speak next. So, and magnetic fields are his vibe. Anyway, thank you, Barbara, for being here.
Very welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us on Book of Scientist. You made this session. Everybody made this session a huge success. I'd like to remind everyone that you can go to bookofscientist.com and click on the session link, and you can take a quiz, a 10-question quiz that Barbara has put together herself.
And full disclosure, I put it together with AI.
Well, that's okay. You read it and made sure it was still valid, right? And then you can take it as many times as you like, and then once you've done that, you can earn a certificate of participation. So we appreciate that. Our next session, I'll just look this up really quick, is on March 7th, and it features, Jim, unmute your mic and show your face. It features Dr. Jim Green, and he is going to be talking about our moon. So Jim is former director of planetary science and former chief scientist at NASA. And so between him and Barbara, you get a double dose of the moon. And that will be March 7th at 11 a.m. on Book of Scientist. You got 15 words for us, Jim?
Well, it's all about the past. What do we know about the moon comes from the missions that we have sent there. And that will be, emphasized in my talk. And hopefully that will get you excited about what can we learn next with the Artemis program.
And then 2 weeks after Jim, a friend of ours, Dr. Henry Throop is going to take us to the opposite edge of the solar system, and we're going to hear about the New Horizons mission to Pluto. So, fantastic semester on Book of Scientist. I hope you'll all join us for our moon on March 7th and Pluto on March 21st. And then coming up, we're going to be talking about exoplanets and astrobiology and commercial space stations and a variety of other things. So please mark your calendars for the first and third Saturdays of every month, and we'll be back. Thank you, everyone. Have a great